Hello, I'm Alaric. My family often described me as a shadow. Too quiet, too soft-spoken, too invisible to make a difference. They chuckle behind my back during family gatherings, labeling me as unemployed, even removing my name from the company I co-founded. And I let them for years. That was until the day I entered the boardroom. They believed they controlled and dismissed them both. But here's the twist they never anticipated. What would you do if your own father called you a mistake while cashing a paycheck bearing your signature? Before we delve deeper, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? More importantly, would you have remained silent as I did, or would you have spoken up sooner? It was nearly 7:15 p.m. when I stepped out of my car and gazed up at the gleaming gold lettering of the steakhouse. I paused a moment longer than necessary. My reflection in the glass door mirrored everything I already knew. I wasn't dressed for this occasion. My blazer was creased from being crumpled in the passenger seat, my shoes mismatched, and I hadn't even brushed the lint off my trousers. But I walked in regardless. The hostess greeted me with a polite smile, perhaps a tad too polite, and led me through the restaurant. "They're already seated," she mentioned, her voice tinged with something, pity? Curiosity? The table was excessively long for a family dinner, made of dark wood with high-back chairs. Everyone was present, Mom adorned in pearls, Dad in his golf jacket, my older brother, Eldon, engrossed in his phone, and my sister, Zella, in her customary soft pink cashmere, surrounded by her circle of admirers. I received a few glances, a couple of quick nods. No one stood to greet me. The seat reserved for me was at the very end, near the restrooms, just past the swinging door that emitted kitchen noise every time a server passed through. I slid into it without comment. Then I noticed the napkins. Everyone had a cloth napkin folded into a neat triangle, embroidered in gold thread with their name. Zella's looked freshly steamed. Even my father's bore. "Gregory!" But mine? It was a single sheet of paper towel. Not even a proper paper napkin. Just a cheap, torn-off square, folded in half and placed beside the plate. I stared at it a moment too long. No one said a word, not even a joke. Just silence. That was the crueler part. I smiled and left it there. The waiter approached to take drink orders. I requested water with lemon. "Still staying sober?" Eldon remarked with a chuckle. "Good on you, bro." That stung more than it should have. The conversation inevitably shifted to careers. It always did. Zella beamed. "My firm's finalizing an acquisition," she said, lifting her wine glass. $50 million in domestic and foreign assets. They're entrusting me to lead the client presentation next week. Everyone applauded as if they were in church. "That's our girl," Dad said, beaming. "Some of us build legacies." Then he turned toward me. "And some of us, well, try." It wasn't just the words. It was the pause before. "Try." As if he had considered softer phrasing and dismissed it intentionally. I didn't respond. I folded the paper towel once more and set it neatly to the side. Zella leaned toward me. "Well, at least you've got all this free time. Must be nice, honestly. Not everyone's cut out for the grind." More laughter, polite, controlled. Even Mom smiled, though she quickly redirected. "Anyway, Eldon, how's the renovation coming along on your backyard deck?" I took a sip of water, letting the coolness linger on my tongue. They thought I was jobless. They had believed so for months after I left my last position, quietly, on my terms. I didn't correct their assumptions. I let them believe what they whispered. "He's drifting. Maybe he's on unemployment. He was never as driven as Zella." Let them think that. Because what I was building was the very foundation they stood upon. I looked around the table. Cherrywood fine china, a bottle of wine that cost more than my first paycheck out of college. The air smelled of truffle butter and arrogance. And they didn't even realize they were dining in one of the establishments I owned. The server returned with a check, placing the leather billfold beside my father. Zella snatched it. No, I got this. Don't worry, Dad. One day, Alaric can treat us once he's back on his feet." Everyone laughed again. Short, controlled, like a sitcom laugh track. I looked up at the server. "No need," I said. "It's already paid for." Zella blinked. "Paid for?" I nodded. "House account." Dad frowned. "House account? What do you mean?" I picked up the crumpled paper towel, held it between two fingers, then set it gently back down. I met each of their eyes, one by one. "The house you're sitting in." I pressed the napkin down gently, then stood, nodding to the server as I passed him. I didn't wait for another comment or even for their reactions to settle. I walked out before anyone could summon the nerve to ask a real question. The night air outside was cool against my skin. I pulled my coat tighter as I crossed the street to my car, keys already in hand. The streets of downtown Atlanta were alive with laughter from other tables, clinking glasses, headlights streaking by. I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door, letting the silence drop like a curtain between me and all of them. As I drove, I didn't turn the radio on. I didn't call anyone. I just let the city move past my windows. My fingers rested on the steering wheel, still remembering the texture of that embroidered napkin, the way it felt against my fingertips, like silk dipped in irony. A red light caught me just outside the industrial district, where the glitter of downtown turned into dull concrete and weathered signage. I glanced to the left, and there it was, still standing. The warehouse. It hadn't changed much. The siding was more chipped than I remembered. The windows had been replaced, but the structure, the bones, were the same. The same bones I bet everything on. I pulled into the empty parking lot and left the engine running. The kind of quiet there hummed differently, like a memory preserved in stillness. That building had once meant everything. At 24, I signed a lease using the savings I scraped together from tutoring and part-time shifts. It was a cavernous, drafty space with old cement floors and a leaky roof. But it was mine, and I turned it into a launch pad. I had this vision, a system that could manage logistics in real time, anticipate shipping delays, optimize routes before a warehouse even noticed the lag. But I also knew no one would take me seriously. Not with my name. Not with my age. Not with the way I carried myself, quietly. So I created a front. A fictional consulting firm. Gave it a name that sounded corporate, masculine, and established. I used the name to pitch the software I designed, wrote the code myself, taught myself back-end security, and cold emailed clients between shifts. Every day I returned to the warehouse, sat on that cold concrete, and worked. No applause. No validation. Just long hours and slow, real progress. One Sunday dinner back then, I mentioned my work. I remember Zella's reaction with precision. She smirked, paused with her fork halfway to her mouth, and said, "That sounds like something from a B-movie script, Alaric." Nerd fantasy. My father didn't even look up from his bourbon. "You need to think about a real job. Something stable. Maybe operations or HR. You're methodical." They didn't ask questions. They just carried on with dessert. I laughed with them that night. But when I got back to the warehouse, I cried. For 20 full minutes, on the floor I just swept. Then I kept writing code. Months later, I secured my first contract. A freight company out of South Carolina. They didn't care about my name. They cared about results. And the system delivered. Out of naive pride, I shared a generic snapshot of the software's capabilities with my family. I didn't reveal much, just enough to show I was onto something. Zella asked a few probing questions. I thought she was interested. I was wrong. She dressed it up, renamed it, pitched it to her own company, repackaged it as if it had sprung from her own mind. I didn't know until Thanksgiving. I walked into the living room to see my father raising a toast to Zella. "To Zella," he said, "for saving the analytics division. She's got a strategist's mind." There was no mention of me. No asterisk. Not even a glance in my direction. I stood there holding a pie I had baked from scratch. 4 hours of effort for a seat at a table that had already forgotten me. My mother clapped. Eldon gave Zella a high five. I sat in the corner and said nothing. That was the turning point. It wasn't just that I was invisible. It was that they were rewriting the story without me in it. I didn't pull out my receipts, the emails, the schematics, the code with digital signatures. I didn't need to. I archived them all. Quietly. Permanently. And I promised myself, if I ever had the chance to tell my story, it would be on my terms. And this time, with proof. Back in the car, I glanced once more at the warehouse before starting the ignition. The building was no longer a dusty relic. It now housed a shipping automation startup, one of many beneath my holding company's umbrella. My name didn't appear on any sign. I'd learned it was better that way, to be the quiet architect behind the foundation. But the lease on that building? It was signed by me. My father and sister were earning paychecks filtered through systems I wrote, data compiled by models I trained, metrics presented through dashboards I had built, alone in that warehouse, while they called me jobless. They didn't know. And I had no plans to tell them, yet. I arrived home later than usual that night. I didn't unpack. I didn't scroll through emails. I poured a glass of water, placed it on the kitchen counter, and left my phone untouched. But sleep was fragile. At 6:38 a.m., I awoke to the distinct sound of buzzing. Ping, ping, ping. My phone screen blinked on before I even reached for it. 28 unread messages, all from the family group chat. My thumb hovered over the thread. That familiar feeling returned, that mix of dread and duty. The one you get before opening something you didn't ask for but couldn't ignore. I tapped. Zella. Was that a flex or a cry for help? Dad. He's always been sensitive. Can't handle pressure. That's why he never held down a real job. Mom. Let's not be too harsh. I think Alaric meant well. Eldon. Or it's just another one of his breakdowns. Breakdown? The word hit harder than they could know. That was the label they had assigned me years ago, after I skipped brunch for the third weekend in a row, because I was flying back from Washington with a signed distribution deal in my briefcase. That label stuck. Every absence became an episode. Every boundary I set was a move. Every success I didn't broadcast became non-existent. I didn't blink. I didn't reply. Instead, I long pressed the message thread and saved screenshots. No commentary. No rebuttal. Just silence. Not out of submission, but precision. A few minutes later, another notification chimed. A private message, this time. From my nephew, Lowell. Hey, Uncle A. I saw the group chat this morning. I just wanted you to know. I think what they said was wrong. I'm with you. I paused. My chest tightened, but it wasn't pain. It was something gentler. Relief, maybe. Another message followed. Also, I wasn't supposed to see this, but I did. Figured you should too. Attached was a screenshot. A private chat thread. Zella to her husband. Once Dad steps down, the VP title's mine. HR won't consider Alaric seriously. He's just the quiet one who shows up at annual dinners. The quiet one. Not the architect. Not the strategist. Not even the partner. Just someone who took nice photos and filled a chair politely. I stared at the message a long moment. Then I wrote back. You did the right thing, Lowell. Thank you. No emoji. No heart. Just truth. Then I returned to the group chat, scrolled to the bottom, and hit leave conversation. It didn't ask me why. Neither did I. I poured a second glass of water, sat at my desk, opened my laptop. There was no hesitation. To Emery Rives, Executive Assistant. Subject, Strategic Board Restructure, Phase 1. Attachments, Senior Personnel Audit. I read the names aloud to myself. Franklin Belford, Logistics Director. Zella Belford, External Affairs VP. Herman Belford, Interim President. All three had something in common. They still believed their authority came by default, not by design. They didn't know the bridge financing that kept them afloat had come from my personal investment group. They didn't know that the holding company their quarterly reports fed into was mine. And they certainly didn't know that within 7 days, their access credentials would expire. But I didn't wait 7 days. By Sunday evening, the wheels were in motion. The city outside my window hummed, calm and distant. I opened a private browser, one that didn't leave footprints. Typed in the encrypted portal for a consulting firm known only in whispers for its internal culture diagnostics. What they didn't know was that this firm, Bradley Finch Solutions, had been mine for 3 years. Acquired through a series of nested subsidiaries. Quietly, intentionally, to Julia Finch. Subject, initiate audit, executive tier. Body, audit to include Franklin Belford and Zella Belford. Anonymous feedback collection opens in 24 hours. Route all findings to compliance folder. Code Alpha. No signatures. No noise. Let the data speak. By Monday afternoon, the inbox was full. The feedback was raw. Some entries were terse, 1 or 2 lines. Others read like confessions after years of neglect. If you're not family, you're a risk. That's the culture. She told me I was too grandmotherly to present at client meetings. I'm 52. He said, cut the women out. It's faster without them. I was in the room. Each entry clawed open a memory I thought I'd sealed. I read every one. Twice. Some 3 times. They had built an empire of favoritism and gatekeeping inside something I meant to be equitable and fair. That empire was about to fall, brick by unearned brick. Tuesday morning arrived quietly. A gray mist rolled over the city, coating glass towers in a soft haze. Midtown bustled beneath me as I stood in my office, sipping coffee, watching the courtyard where employees filtered in, unaware that today marked a turning point. At 9:02 a.m., my screen blinked with the first notification. Access denied Z. Belford. HR archives, restricted. Then another. Access denied F. Belford. Financial databank, rejected. I turned to Emery, who stood at my doorway with a tablet in hand. Make sure it's all documented. She nodded and stepped away. By mid-morning, the silence began to fracture. Zella burst into HR demanding answers. Her badge failed at multiple terminals. Her voice echoed down corridors. She called it a technical issue. I called it a mirror. And then came the counterpunch. A flag message surfaced from internal affairs, an anonymous tip alleging I had tampered with performance reviews due to emotional instability. Attached was a PDF, and signed but professionally phrased. The language was clinical. Concern, cloaked as character assassination. But the file's metadata gave it away. It was created on a device registered to Zella's assistant, the same one used to prepare her quarterly summaries. Sloppy. I didn't panic. I stood. I didn't call a meeting. I didn't need to. I found her pacing near the executive wing. She didn't notice me until I was 10 feet away. Her posture straightened. Her face tried to soften. If you're going to falsify documents, I said, voice even, at least encrypt them properly. She blinked, then scowled. You're just bitter because Dad never saw you as a leader. Did he see you? I asked. Or did he just stop looking? She flinched, then gathered herself. You've never been more than background noise, Alaric. You don't have the spine to lead. I stepped closer. He never saw any of us clearly. But the difference is, I stopped needing him to. Then I turned and walked away before the silence could fill with anything else. Back in my office, I drafted a message to legal, ethics, and compliance. Subject, formal request, misconduct review. Action, immediate board-level discussion. Attachments, verified findings. No CCs. No preamble. Just a send button, and I pressed it. Then I opened my calendar. Thursday, 10 a.m., conference room 9B, full board assembly. They wouldn't see the invite until the system synced at midnight. By then, the agenda would be locked. The room would be secure. And the history they tried to rewrite would face its first red line. Thursday arrived. By the time the board entered conference room 9B, The doors had already clicked shut behind them. They exchanged glances, half confused, half wary. I sat at the head of the table, legal to my right. The board secretary beside me, folders neatly stacked. My father entered last. His expression was part irritation, part disbelief. "What is this?" he demanded. Zella followed behind, trying to smile to charm. "Is this another audit session?" she asked, falsely light. I motioned to the frosted glass. "The room is sealed. Confidentiality protocols are in effect. You'll want to sit." They did, eventually. The chairs scraped against the tile, sounding more like consequences than furniture. I passed the stack of folders to the secretary, who distributed them one by one. Inside, incorporation records, shell company transitions, ownership structures, the signatures that tied their power back to me. They flipped through pages faster with each turn. My father's fingers trembled. Zella just stared. "This is nonsense," he muttered. "No," I replied. "This is paper. Truth just chose to live in it before you did." I reached for a small remote and pressed the button. A speaker embedded in the ceiling clicked to life. Voices filled the room. Real, unfiltered voices. "Only the family matters. Everyone else is expendable. She said I was too old to be relevant. I turned 50 that week. He told us to skip hiring women. It'd avoid distractions." Laughter followed, recorded. Real. I pressed pause. "Those were recorded at your last off-site retreat. Not staged. Not misunderstood." The air in the room froze. A board member leaned back, visibly shaken. Zella stared at her folder, but didn't move. My father rubbed his temple with a heavy hand. The legal representative spoke next. "These recordings, combined with the verified manipulation of reporting structures and ethics violations, meet the threshold for immediate board reconstitution under Clause 14. The chairman, older and normally soft-spoken, cleared his throat. "Mr. Belford, Ms. Belford, your resignations are expected by end of day." No one moved. Zella's voice cracked first. "You can't do this." I stood. "You erased me to preserve your illusion of control. Now you're being erased from the legacy you pretended to leave." Then I turned to the assistant waiting outside. A nod. The door lock disengaged. They left slowly, paper still in hand, the weight of exposure clinging to their coats. Back in my office, I didn't sit. I went to the window, pulled the blinds wide, let the morning light fill the room like a declaration. Then I picked up the phone and dialed one number. "Release the statement," I said. 20 minutes later, the press release went live. Headline: Organizational reform underway at Belford Holdings. New leadership pledges transparency and accountability. For the first time, my name stood alone on an official announcement. Alaric D. Belford, Chief Executive Officer. No footnote. No alias. No shared credit. Just clarity. The response was immediate. Messages flooded in, emails, calls, direct messages. From former employees, interns, contractors, managers. Most of them women, but not all. Some wrote long paragraphs recounting moments of exclusion, of being overlooked. Others simply said 2 words. "Thank you." It was overwhelming and oddly quiet. The kind of quiet that happens after a storm clears, when the damage becomes visible and the healing can begin. That afternoon, I saw a post that stopped me mid-scroll. It was a photo. 2 side-by-side frames. The first, a grainy image from the early days of our startup team inside the warehouse. I was in the back, half obscured, holding a clipboard. Unnamed. The second, the same image recropped. Me at the center, holding the same clipboard, but now in full light. The caption read, "He built it. They just stood in front of it." It struck harder than any press coverage ever could. It told the truth with no flourish. And it caught fire. That evening, as momentum shifted publicly, Zella and my father tried to recover. They released a video statement, seated on a beige sofa, framed to look casual. Her makeup was pristine, his shirt collar slightly unbuttoned. Zella spoke first, her tone trembling at the edge of practiced sincerity. This wasn't about improvement. This was a vendetta. Alaric has been waiting years for this. My father nodded, adding, "He's always had trouble with boundaries. We've tried to support him, but he's twisting this into something ugly." I didn't respond, but the public did. Former employees began replying, posting old emails, telling personal stories of disrespect and marginalization. One person wrote, "I was told to wear flats instead of heels because I was too tall for clients. That came straight from Franklin Belford. This is justice." Another posted, "Zella called me a distraction because I wore red lipstick in front of a room full of interns. I cried in the elevator." She laughed. The tide turned permanently. A few days later, a small box arrived at my home. No courier, just left on my doorstep. It was old, the cardboard soft around the edges. My mother's handwriting on the label. Inside, 3 family photos, a tarnished charm bracelet, and an envelope sealed with brittle wax. The note read, "Don't let them teach you to disappear. You aren't made to fit their frame. You were made to build your own." The words were faded, but I read them aloud. Slowly. Twice. Then I framed it. The following week, I mounted it on the wall above my desk, beside a new plaque. CEO, Alaric D. Belford. No more initials buried in footer text. No more whispered contributions. I arrived earlier than most now. Passed through the same lobby where I once sat waiting, holding a resume no one ever asked to see, where the receptionist used to glance over me. Now, behind that same reception desk, etched into the glass, was a quote. "Some of us don't raise our voices. We build the rooms where others finally can." People paused when they read it. New hires took photos. I simply walked by. No applause. No grand entrance. Just presence. And peace. Zella never returned to the corporate world. Her boutique firm folded under scrutiny. My father quietly retired from consultancy. They moved to the margins, reshaping the story for smaller audiences. I didn't correct them. I didn't follow. I didn't gloat. I simply kept building. One afternoon, I found myself in a breakout room with a young analyst, Adrienne, a promising mind in logistics, who reminded me a bit of myself. She hesitated before speaking. "I almost left," she admitted, "before everything changed. I thought I didn't belong here. People like me didn't have a place." I nodded gently. "I know that feeling," I said, "but don't let anyone convince you to disappear. Not even quietly." She blinked fast but didn't cry. She just smiled. It was a small victory, but it was real. And sometimes, the quiet victories matter the most.